Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DeAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DeAlto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 254 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DeAlto. Today we are talking about leadership, voice, education, and empowerment with Netta Lena. And I love Netta. She is a powerful and dynamic woman whose experiences brought a ton of value and insights to the conversation. Her big truth was around accepting and embracing all the feelings, positive or negative. We talked about victimhood versus victim mindset, which is something that people get really twisted around in an unhealthy way on their growth journeys, how our past always prepares us for our future, Tony Robbins' controversial response to a woman asking him about the Me Too movement, empowerment, preparation, discernment, and values in leadership, and much, much more. Enjoy this conversation and share it up. If you have not yet checked out the Trust Assessment, you can check that out over at thetrustassessment.com. As well, we have some spaces in our Chicago and Asheville, North Carolina Wild Soul Movement weekend workshops coming up later in the year. You can check those out at wildsoulmovement.com. And last but not least, the show notes for this episode can be found at untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -254. Again, that's untameyourself.com/TT-254. Let's get into today's show. Netta, I'm excited you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I know we had to reschedule because I botched a time thing. That happens at least like once a month.
I've done it. It's okay.
I know, but I love when it happens, and I always let the audience know because I feel like there's always a reason. When it happens, I feel simultaneously bummed and excited because I'm like, why is it going to be perfect on the day when we do connect?
Absolutely.
So the first question I ask people now is, what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
Right now, currently, I would say accepting and embracing all of your feelings, both the positive and the negative. That's a big thing for me in my life right now, for sure.
Were you someone who used to only try to focus on the positive, or?
You know, I think we all do. I think that, you know, naturally as a woman, sometimes we hide our feelings or we just kind of keep them internal and we push them down to the bottom of our feet. And I also think, in my personal opinion, sometimes in society, we've gotten so far to like the victim mode, like don't be a victim and, don't play this card. And I feel like that's done a little bit of damage in how we think about how we can express how we feel if it's not positive. And so I think that naturally is that sometimes we get this feeling of, well, I don't want people to feel sorry for me and I don't want to be the victim. So you don't want to fully embrace some of the feelings that you have that aren't positive, So, personally, I've been through a lot the past couple of years, and I'm finally understanding that it's okay to have a day where I just don't feel amazing, and that is okay.
I am so glad that you brought this up. I'm 1,000% with you. I had a couple years there where I was that person. I was really judgy and also really avoidant of anything that was like remotely in the realm of victim mindset, right? Yeah. But then I went through a really hard time myself, and I realized that we are victims of things sometimes. We don't have to like live in victimhood, but it actually serves no one if A, we deny that we were the victim of a thing, and B, if we don't talk about it, because then everyone else, like you were saying, is just stuffing it and struggling silently because they don't want to burden other people, or because they're judging themselves, or because they're worried with the law of attraction that like they're going to attract to more negative things. But like, this is real shit.
Yeah. And then I think that's the key, is not staying in that mentality of victimhood. And I think that's the key is, it doesn't have to be extreme. Like you can express yourself without staying there for weeks and days and years, it's just really finding that balance.
Yeah. So at the time of recording this, I'm curious if you've seen it. If you haven't, we'll skip it. But have you seen the Tony Robbins thing going around where he talked about the Me Too movement? How did you feel about that? So if anyone listening, you could look it up now. There was a video on Facebook. It got taken down, but essentially what happened is a woman stood up to ask Tony Robbins what he thinks about the Me Too movement, and his basic response was along the lines of that these people are being victims and they're not helping themselves out. There's so many different interpretations, but since Ned is here, I'm curious how you felt about it.
Yeah. When I watch things like that, I always try to put myself in the shoes of both people. Okay. Like trying to understand the perspective.
Yeah.
So naturally, of course, I understand completely what the woman was saying and what her argument was. And I also understand where Tony Robbins was coming from. However, I believe his delivery was wrong. And I think that that's what got him into trouble. It was it wasn't very compassionate. It was very aggressive. But I think what his whole point is, yes, there are people absolutely that are victims and that have dealt with crappy things. But then how do we move forward and how do we make a positive out of it? In my opinion, I think that's what he was trying to say, but he just delivered it in a way that did not resonate. And that really, it sounded as if he was putting the whole movement down. So, and then that's really key, is how are you delivering the message? So I think I understood where he was coming from, but I just think he did it in a way that was not accurate.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't watch the whole video. I went to a Tony Robbins thing in like 2012, and I was never really a fan of his stuff after that. But I felt it was really dismissive.
Yeah.
I feel like that is the missing piece in a lot of leaders these days, is compassion. If someone's righteousness overrides their compassion, and if you feel the righteousness more than you feel the compassion, like that person's going to lose me 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, was very much, this is my opinion. And I think it's really important for us to start being able to say, I hear what you're saying. I respect and I completely understand what you're saying. Here's my perspective, or here's my thoughts. And sometimes we get a little bit in this idea of, no, it's this, A, B, C, and D. And that doesn't work.
I posted something the other day on Facebook about how like curiosity is essentially the bridge from everything, right? Fear and excitement exist on the same spectrum. Like what's the difference is curiosity, right? When we're afraid, we get curious, we can get back to excitement. When we don't understand something, we can get curious. When we don't know what's going on with someone, we just get curious. So I feel like that's the bridge there. So I want to come back. You said something about, the way he delivered the message. And this is largely what you do. You teach on leadership. I didn't know this until just right before we started recording. You were a performer. So you have experience delivering messages. You teach, you direct, you do this in many, many different contexts and have done it in many, many different contexts. So I want to talk about being a messenger with you.
Thanks. Great. I love that. I think I learned this really fast, and I learned it as a performer. And we don't realize that our past always prepares us for our future, right? But when we're in the moment, we don't get it.
Right.
And so, when I was performing in countries where we didn't speak the same language, in Russia, in Japan, in Germany, in jails, and I think I learned really, really fast that it's not about me. It's not about the messenger. It's about the audience and who you're speaking to or who you're singing to or whatever you're doing in whatever form that you're delivering something. It's about them. And that's something that I've always kind of stood back. It's not about you. It's about what does the audience need? Who is the audience? And that is the first step to really delivering your message. And I think a lot of times, I know I used to be this way, that we get in our head. It's like, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, and all these different things. And then we get out there, and that's not what they need at all. They need the complete opposite about what you thought it was. So that's key. And I think that's key in leadership too, is really just taking a look at your audience, whether it's your staff, whoever you're mentoring, and taking yourself and your ego out of the picture and thinking, what do you need right now? And how can I get that to you in a way that's effective?
Yeah. And effective is the key word there, right? Because there's potential for ego there in even asking the question, what do you need right now? Because sometimes we assume or we think we know better for people than they know for themselves. Right. So how do you discern what people need or what the audience needs in a way that isn't like self-righteous or all-knowing?
Yeah, well, intuition's a big thing. Okay. And that's a little bit more hard, but really feeling in your gut, the energy of the room, the energy of the people. And sometimes it's trial and error too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you try something and in the moment you're like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
So it's also about being in the present as a leader too. And as you're making these decisions, being able to feel if they're resonating with the room or if it's resonating with your audience. I mean, I've done this number of times as a speaker. I'll get up there and I'll start speaking and I'm doing my talk. You have your signature talk, I'm sure you know. And I'm doing my talk and I could feel like, okay, this isn't working right now. The energy, it's not resonating, and I have to make a shift based off of what I'm feeling for the audience, and then magic will start to happen.
Can that be taught? Being able to feel the room and read the room? I feel like for some people, it comes way more naturally than others, for sure. Like that's something I didn't even know. I've been doing that my whole life.
Yeah, I think it can be taught, but a real key, element to it is getting out of your head.
Yeah.
Because if you're too much in your head and you're in what you're doing, then you're not going to be able to have that space of what's happening in the room. Right? You're very narrow-minded in what's going on with yourself. And I think you really have to get to a place where you're okay, you're vulnerable, you're good with yourself. And then once that happens, you can start to feel and see what other people are feeling and how it goes, right? But if you're in your head too much, you can't. So I think that's a big thing.
What are some of the ways that you get out of your head?
That's a great question. For me, I know this is going to sound crazy, but when I'm up in front or when I'm talking to people, I'm not in my head. And I think it's because I do a lot of preparation beforehand, right? So that's key. But then going in with the mindset of shifting. So, you create the box, but then you have to have this mindset that if the box needs to break and I need to break the walls down, I can do that too in the moment.
I love that.
But, my father was an incredible man, and he taught me something at a really young age when I was singing on stage. And I remember, I think I was 16 and I was doing the talent show. And I told my dad, I'm so nervous. And I actually got 5 bloody noses before I went on stage.
Oh, wow.
Dressing. And my dad was very wise. And he looked at me and he was like, well, you're being selfish then. Oh. And that took me off guard. I'm like, I'm being selfish because I'm nervous? He's like, yeah, why do you go on stage and sing? Do you go on stage and sing just because you like to sing? If you do, you could do that in the bathroom. You can go in your room and sing. Right? But why did you choose to do it in a format where you're in front of people? Is it because you just like to sing, or is it because you want to share your singing and the message with the audience? And I was like, aha.
Oh, man, that's great.
Yeah. So he was like, so when you're nervous, then you forget about the audience. And now it's all about you and your nerves and how you feel. And the original intention of standing up on stage and giving has gone away. And that just resonated with me so much as a young girl that from there, I did all the prep that I needed to beforehand so that when I got on stage, I didn't have to think about the lyrics. I didn't have to think about the story. I didn't have to think about the text in a way that was in my head and analytical. I could now just be in a space where I could just share and give and hopefully receive from the audience at the same time.
I love this so much. And I always like to relate things. You know, some people listening, they're not speakers, they're not performers, they might not be on a stage, but we're all presenting every single day, right? If you're a parent, you're having to speak to your children. If you're a friend, you're speaking to your friends. Like we're all, you know, you go to the bank, you're speaking to the teller. And it's such a cool thing. This little tweak, like if I'm nervous, I'm being selfish. Why am I here if I'm not here to, at the very minimum, be connecting, just connecting with other people, especially during a time when I feel like our connectivity is so digital in so many ways that people are like starving for real human connection anyway.
Absolutely. And you know, when you, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're a speaker, performer, it doesn't matter. You know, when you're talking to somebody, if they're in a space where they're giving and able to receive. And I think, like you said, that's key right now.
So what do you do if you do have an audience and you know that like it's just not a fit, right? They're not receptive, you're not jiving. How do you, and I guess this is the overarching question is, what are your strategies or tactics for getting through something that you know is like not the best, but you just need to cross the finish line?
Everyone's a little bit different. Me personally, I like to call it out. So I have been in a room where it's not working. I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to stop because I'm not feeling like it's connecting with you guys. What do you need?
Cool.
I have done that. And then I just open it up to the audience and I'm like, share some things with me, stand up, tell me what it is that's not working for you, or tell me what are some struggles that you're going through right now. And now we just have a conversation. And sometimes I just have to like ditch everything that I thought I was going to do. And I've also done that with teaching, I teach at a college and sometimes I have my curriculum and I'm ready to go and I start teaching and I look at them and I'm like, okay, this isn't working. What do you guys need? What's happening right now? And we go into conversation. And then from there, it reignites.
I'm curious, is there a difference? Have you experienced a difference between doing that in front of like a quote adult audience and a college audience? Is it different?
Not so much. I think the first feeling in an adult audience is just the shock factor of like, whoa, she actually stopped and asked, because sometimes we're so used to just like plowing through it. But I think that people respect that. And I think that they can appreciate, okay, like that person is able to recognize that, maybe there's, 100 of them sitting on their phone. Clearly it's not resonating because you're on your phone and you're not engaged. So, I think that's important. And then being able to have activities in your back pocket where you can get the room up to do it, even if you need to buy yourself a little bit of time. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, grab a partner and we'll do like a 1 to 2 minute activity. And that gives me 2 minutes to reassess what it is that's happening.
I love the flexibility and the agility that you are talking about here. And again, Netta is talking about this in the context of being a teacher, being a performer, or being a speaker, but this is life, right? Yeah. Where we have to be on our toes all the time because you never know what's going to happen. So I know the core of a lot of the different things that you do is empowerment.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, how would you define empowerment, or how do you think about empowerment or approach it?
So empowerment for me is really inner self-love. It really is. It's being able to find what it is that you have, that you already have. So everything you need is inside of you already. And I think empowerment is being able to do the deep dive inside and pull that out and bring it to the surface. A lot of times our self-love, our inner love, it's clouded. It's clouded by our past. It's clouded by situations that we've been through. And I think it's really important to reignite that self-love and that confidence and that empowerment that you have within to get where you need to go, whether it's in your professional career or romantic or building relationships, it doesn't matter.
And when I'm glad to hear you define it that way. One of my pet peeves in empowerment work is when people say, I want to empower others. because I'm with you. Actually, the core of Wild Soul Movement is everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. So I don't believe I can actually empower another. I could just help them access what's already in there.
100%.
So what are the challenges for you? Again, I love that you have different contexts that you do your empowerment work in. Do you find different challenges in different spaces, or is it pretty universal?
It's pretty universal. And I think the main factor is just the beliefs, the limiting beliefs that we've picked up along the way. That's really the core of, I mean, as you mentioned, right? Everything that you have is inside of you already, but we have either forgotten it, we've lost it, or we're not able to see it because of everything that's happened in our life so far. And it could be really traumatic things, and it could be small things, because people are all affected differently, right? So one person might be told, let's say from an ex-lover, that they were too fat. And now for the rest of their life, until they get over it, it has affected their weight. It has affected how they look at their body. It has affected how they date because they don't think they're good looking enough, right? Another person, that might not affect them, but maybe the death of a loved one has affected them, right? And now they have a hard time receiving and giving love because they're scared to lose. So it just really depends on how people react to situations, but it all starts in the inside. And you're absolutely right. You know, I cannot empower, but we can help facilitate and mentor, you know, activities and how we look at things so that people can find their inner strength again. And that's key. And and everybody has it. Everybody has limiting beliefs. Everybody has picked up, you know, baggage and things along the way that have now affected them. And sometimes we don't even know. It's in our habits. It's in the way we love. It's in the way that we react. They've all been learned habits. And it is a process to get back to who you are. And this isn't how I react. This is how I reacted because I picked this up from parent A. Right? And now really figuring out what's you and who's at the core of you.
I am really interested to hear your experience. You traveled a lot, all over the world, primarily performing. Were you with a troupe? Were you with a group of people? Were you coordinating and organizing that? What was that? What was going on there?
Yeah, so I am and I was a part of an incredible nonprofit organization called the Young Americans. And there's two aspects to them. So they're a professional performing arts group that tours the world, but they also give back. So instead of just performing and making money as performers, on the downtime in between the shows, we would give back to the community. So we would work with youth, really anybody that needed it, and like empower them through the tool of music. So I did that for many years in a group. So the cast is usually about 32 to 36 people, mixed gender, all different talents. And sometimes I did manage a tour, and sometimes I just went as a performer. And I started when I was 20 years old. I graduated college, and then I went and I started performing with them. And I was on the road for about 7.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what we did. And it was an incredible experience.
Where was your favorite place that you went?
You know, people ask me this all the time, and I can never give one because every place is so unique.
I know. I actually I know there's not an answer to that question, but I ask it because I just love to see how people react to it. Keep going.
Yeah. And I'm just like, there isn't, because I'm a huge into culture. I love learning. I love diversity. So for me, every country is completely unique in itself, and I thrive off of that. You know, so I could say, you know, Russia was amazing. Japan was amazing. Ireland was amazing. Morocco. There's all these places that I've been, and they're all equally amazing because they're different. And I just love embracing culture.
Did you particularly feel any at home, like soul resonance, like, oh, my body loves it here in any particular? So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you just said, you love the culture, like you want to learn it, you want to absorb it. But in my travel experiences, there are certain places I go to that feel like me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. In different ways, yes. I resonate a lot with the Japanese culture because it's Eastern, right? And I'm Middle Eastern. So there's a lot of similarities there. But I think just as a soul and as a person, I really resonate with Germany.
Oh, interesting. How come?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's the village or the town feeling. It's just very authentic and peaceful. And, you know, the cobblestones, just little things like that made me feel very relaxed and peaceful.
I like this. And knowing what you know now with the empowerment work that you do and all of the other experiences that you've had beyond performing, were there any cultures? What did you notice? I guess I'm curious for observations about like the state of empowerment or the barrier to empowerment in these different places around the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the one thing that I've noticed across the board is everybody is the same. So the struggles that we're having here in America, whether it's with women or with youth, I can't speak so much with males because I haven't played in that field as much. So I don't like to speak about something that I don't feel knowledgeable about.
Thank you.
I don't want to pretend. But definitely in regards to youth and women, it's really all the same. It just manifests differently. But really, like youth across the board, they struggle with the same things. Women across the board, they struggle with the same things. Now, there's different countries where you are a little bit more quiet about it, right? Like obviously in some Middle Eastern countries, we don't speak up as much, but we're still dealing with the same things across the board.
And so for youth, what are the top handful of issues?
Not feeling good enough, for sure. Constant bullying, this is a global issue, right? Weight issues, the way you look, these little things happen everywhere. Parenting. So across the board, youth are being affected by all of these different elements the exact same way. And they're starting to manifest the same, right? Like I remember in Germany, and we don't hear about it too much, but I've been in a number of institutes in Germany where they just had a school shooting, because a kid was bullied and they didn't get to it fast enough, or maybe he didn't get the help that he needed. So it's the same issues, bullying, self-love, the way they look at their body, the relationships with the parents, the adults that have come into their life. It really is.
I remember when my friend Kimberly Ann Johnson was on the show, she'd spent many years in Brazil, and she was saying that the culture there they're not all about looking at their problems and unpacking like the way we are in the US. They're really not self-help oriented. They're really not into blaming their parents for everything. And, psychologically, we know that what happens when you're from like ages 0 to 7 and in your formative years, that stuff really impacts you regardless of how you want to look at it as an adult. But would you say the US is the most self-help or introspective? And there's a shadow and a light side to that, but do we do that more than everybody else?
Yes, I would agree with that statement. I think Canada has one step above us in that regard, because they do a lot of work with like mental health and embracing, those issues. So I would say that they're a little bit more ahead of the game. But even though it is still a problem in America, yes, I would say that we are ahead of the game, because that is an issue overseas, especially in countries like Japan. They don't talk as much about what they're feeling in the inside. I would 100% agree with that statement.
I have a friend who was doing some mentoring over in Japan, and I remember her telling me she was working with women. And she was saying very, 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 very repressed, not in a judgmental way, but just some of the tools she was bringing to them. They were like, oh my goodness, like we've never talked about this. This is so not in our culture. And it's funny that you said we're ahead of the game. This just shows our biases. Or I was watching this amazing video by a woman named Liz Plank, who I'm trying to get on the show yesterday, about identifying our unconscious biases. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm a little jaded on the self-help industry right now. So I was saying it almost in like, do we do this too much? And you were like, we're totally ahead of the game.
Yeah. We are ahead of the game, but we're so far from where we need to be at the same time, as you know, which is what we talked about earlier about our feelings and that kind of, and just emotional intelligence in general.
Yeah. Well, and I think the problem for me is when it becomes self-indulgent and it's not effective. You used the word effective earlier, when it just everything becomes about us and our own stuff. And it's not, this really reminds me of what you said your dad said. It's less about, the people so we could show up better in our lives, and more like we just get so caught up in our own stuff.
Right. And I think that, you were saying about the self-help world, and I resonated with that a little bit, because I think that sometimes we get into this space where we're like, just do it. You can do it. Just go for it. And sometimes that's not enough. Like people don't know what that means. Right. And so, and so when you talk about this idea of being effective, it's like, you really need to do some deep dives and really get to the core of it all without just, because I think a lot of times people feel bad when they're like, well, I just don't feel motivated. Well, you just got to go for it. Just be motivated. Like,
crush it. I know. I didn't read it, but I get subscribed to Medium, and I get like the Daily Digest or whatever, and sometimes I'll see a headline and I'll click on it. I saw this one and I didn't click on it, but I kind of want to go back now. It said Gary Vee is trying to kill you. So if anyone listening isn't familiar with Gary Vee, he's like this kind of mogul entrepreneur guy. This is how I would describe him. And he is all about the hustle.
Yeah.
He's like, listen, if you want to build something, if you have a full-time job, put your kids to bed and work from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Like, you can sleep later. It's like the antithesis of everything I believe in.
So true. It's funny.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it just made me laugh. The title, Gary Vee is trying. People are, this goes back to the digital communication thing where everything is so sensationalized in our culture.
Sure.
How is that? I love when I get people who have done way more travel and like been a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Gotten to like dive into and like really be in a culture, right? Like sometimes when you travel, you know, you sightsee. I think there's a difference between sightseeing and like being with and working with the people like you have in some of these contexts. So when was it? You said you did that for 7.5 years. What were those years?
About 20 to 27 years old. I stopped touring in 2011.
Okay.
I just felt like I was done. Honestly.
So the internet was still happening. Facebook was it wasn't like it was now though. No. But were you noticing any difference between how people were interacting with all the new digital ways to communicate?
Now or then?
Then.
I felt, and this is a constant struggle with me that I feel with, especially with the youth. I felt that, 7 years ago, there was a lot more communication with people, and there was a lot more being able to look in someone's eyes and just have a very open, true conversation. And I find that a struggle now, but there was a lot more of that back then, where you can really just sit and have an incredible conversation without having to worry about like the text message going off, and being in the middle of a conversation and someone saying 1 second because this text is more important than the conversation I'm having right now. So there was a lot more of that back then. And obviously, as you know, we're changing, and it's really affecting us, I think.
In your classrooms, are you noticing this also affects social skills, people's ability to like speak up, raise their hand, give an answer?
Big time. Big time. And not only is it affecting that, but it's also affecting the work process. Like understanding that it is a process to achieve, whether it's an A on your paper or to get to the next step in your career, it's a process. And because there's so much information that you can get on your phone or you can access online, there's this feeling of like instant gratification.
Yes.
Right? It's, well, I could just go online and do it. I can look up this, I can look up that. Where before it's like, if I needed to get a message to somebody, like I either had to call them, or I needed to write something, or we needed to meet in person, where now it's like, love you, through a text.
Yeah.
So everything is changing at a drastic rate. And again, now it's like one click, Amazon, one click,
Everything is one click away.
24 hours,
Yeah.
But before it was a process. So and I think that that's affecting their work ethic and how they get from, place A to place B.
Is there entitlement? Is there impatience? So work ethic, because they're not building the muscle, but what's the mindset around that?
People use this word entitlement a lot, and especially obviously, with the last, 10 to 15 years of generation and millennials and that kind of thing. And it's not, entitlement is the right word, but it's not their fault.
Right.
I can say that. Because of so much policy change that happened in education with the government, No Child Left Behind, treating everyone the same, everybody gets a blue ribbon, right?
Yeah,
That kind of thing. And so now at an older age, it's not so much entitlement as much as it is, well, this is how we were trained. Like we all get this. We all deserve this. Like, they've been deprived of like this feedback of this, being able to construct something and say, hey, we need to work on this, because we've shifted that in education. And now, 5-10 years later, it's affecting the way they work. It's affecting the way that they have a relationship. It's affecting all of these things. And again, it's not their fault. It's kind of the system that we've created, but we have to learn how to work with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. I remember many years ago, I'm having this flashback to, I sold Cutco knives. Have you ever heard of Cutco?
Of course.
In my college, and then after college, I ran a district office. And I remember the president of the Eastern region, which was the region I was in, telling a story at a conference about his daughter's soccer team. And that was exactly it. They got a trophy even though they didn't win. Yeah. And he threw out the trophy and he was like, you didn't earn this trophy. He didn't care that that's the way that they were indoctrinating those children. He was like, not my kid. You didn't win, and that's okay. The other team did better than you did. He was trying to teach it. This actually wasn't an even playing field. Somebody did better than somebody else. And there was a value in that, because this trained entitlement, I like the way you described that, there's such a lack of resiliency, which means such a higher level of fragility. And I think we're seeing it in so many different areas. I mean, in race and culture with, white fragility, as people are, the conversation is just much more in people's faces now than I think it's ever been about unpacking privilege and white supremacy and dominant race and marginalization and all of these things. People are so fragile.
Yeah. And what that's done is done a couple things. Those that, didn't really deserve the trophy, they were like, I don't have to work that hard because I know I'm going to get rewarded anyway.
Yep.
And those that did deserve it, that worked really hard, now they became, well, I don't really need to work that hard because it doesn't matter, because even those that aren't as qualified as me are going to be rewarded anyways.
Yep.
And then, as you mentioned with resilience, it's now created this fear of failure, right? Because we haven't allowed them to fail. Just like you were saying with the speaker, we're saying, hey, you didn't win. Okay. And that is totally okay. Now let's work a little bit harder and hopefully you win next time. We haven't allowed that to happen. So now when they really do fail, now they're in the workforce or they're in college and they really are really categorized by whatever it is, your knowledge or your technique or your skill. Now it's like, whoa, are you telling me that I don't get this? Yes, we are, because you don't have the skill. And that's why our suicide rate has just went through the roof, because they don't know how to handle it. And we have the highest rate of depression we've ever had, because we haven't taught that idea of it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
Failure is a part of success.
And you're not going to be good at everything. And there's no reason why. Like, if you haven't trained in a skill, there's no reason why you should be good at something that you just have no experience in. I had an experience that you described. I became the person who was like, oh, I'm just not going to try as hard because it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
And for, many, many years, I'm actually still untraining myself from this and giving myself permission to go full out. Because my 10, 20, 30% could lap a lot of people's 110% in certain areas, not every area, of course.
Of course. No, absolutely. And it has done that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And you said earlier, this stuff shows, this is where I geek out on this, because it shows in our behaviors. It shows in our relationships. It literally shows in how we show up. And it's so damaging for interaction with others, because people are just like kind of half-assing almost everything.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a big generalization, by the way. I want to acknowledge that I just made a huge sweeping generalization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and that's part of the reason why I got into this field, because I recognize, and when I say field, I mean the field of empowerment and education, and really kind of bridging the gap and bringing them together.
Yeah.
Because I recognize that this is what was happening. And I'm very fortunate because I didn't really deal with a lot of that until I was in my late 20s. That's when all these things, whatever limiting beliefs and a little bit of fear started to creep in. And it was at a later stage in my life, but I recognized it as at a young age. And I was starting to, empower and help educate at a young age because I just didn't understand. I was like, why are you afraid to do that? Or how come you're not putting your best foot forward? Why aren't you using your full potential?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more in there that you have.
Yeah.
Showing up at a small percentage when you can give 100.
Yeah. This is fascinating. So what are you just so freaking passionate or excited about right now? For people listening, go to YouTube. I want you to see Netta. She is just so stunning and bright. She has bright colors in the background. I feel like you're radiating, and I need to know why. Why are you radiating like this? What's happening in your life that you feel like sharing that is appropriate or you want to?
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are happening. There's movement with the company, but I think the main thing for me is just that I finally, and when I say finally, because it's always a process, I'm in a place of just vulnerability and openness, and just being transparent. And when you're able to get in that place, in my personal opinion, you're able to receive more and also give more. And so I'm just in a place where there's no neurosis happening right now. Right now.
Right now.
In a couple years, things might change. But right now, it's almost like I've kind of just given myself to the earth. Whatever happens. And I've been through a lot the past couple of years. And so I've learned that I have to be this way. Totally. I used to be that person that I did A, B, C, D, E, and F, and it's going to get me all the way to Z. And I did all the right steps. And then when time came, that didn't happen. Life was like, nope, you're not going to do that. You're going to go here, and was like a complete game changer. And so I finally have gotten to this place, this small ounce of wisdom that's just do what you got to do every day, and it'll lead you. It'll take you where you need to be.
I love that. So you are a person who I know you do a lot of different things professionally. You multifaceted. And I love talking to other multifaceted people. And I'm always curious how you discern where you put your time, effort, energy, attention, and resources. So I know you attend events. Like just yesterday on Instagram, you had posted from an event that I had decided not to go to, and you said it was amazing. And so how do you decide, okay, I'm going to work on this project, or I'm going to volunteer over here, I'm going to give my time, I'm going to take on that project, I'm going to do this collaboration, I'm going to spend my money on that. How do you make those choices? Because one of the things I talk about a lot, we're inundated with choices in the 2018, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's funny because I just got a book called The Paradox of Choice. I don't know if you've read it.
I have not read it. I've heard that. I've used that phrase actually a lot. I didn't realize it was a book.
Yeah, I haven't dived into it yet, but it's about this concept of we're inundated with all these choices, and sometimes it can make things even more difficult because you don't know what to do.
Yes.
For me, it's a little bit of structure and a little bit of alignment, both combined. So for me, first off, you have to really, really, really know in yourself, what do you want to be aligned with? That's the first thing. Because if opportunities and events and all these things are coming your way, if you're not aligned with them, then why, not to say don't invest in them, but you can't put all your energy towards something that doesn't feel right for you. Mm-hmm. Right. So I love empowerment. I love education, youth and women. That's where I'm at right now. And that's where all my creative flow is happening. And that's where my energy is going. And so if I if I get an invite for something that's completely out of that realm and I just don't have the time right now, then I'll respectfully deny at this moment. I cannot, so I think it's really deciphering. So I put a lot of my energy towards, events, meetups, whatever, that are all kind of where I'm at right now in my life. And that's fine. Now I do one or two things a month that aren't just because it's good. It's good to go out there and explore. And sometimes things that you don't even realize would impact you, give you an idea.
Yes.
That then crosses over to this area. So for me, I do. And that's why I said structure. I'm kind of a nerd. I have this whole Excel sheet and I'll put in my little events and my meetings and it's color coordinated. And then I'll find my one or two, events or hangouts or whatever a month that I'll put in that are completely different just so that I can stay fresh and learn and stay on top of it.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. So one of the reasons I moved, I was in San Diego for a couple of years. I wanted to move back up to LA because I wanted to have access to more things like what you're saying, just like the random maybe I'm not even interested in this, but get me out of my bubble. It just feels so important. So, and I'll share something on what you just said. A couple weeks ago, there's an organization in LA called Aware LA, and it's aligned with another organization called White People for Black Lives. And so they're doing a lot of social justice work and some organizing work. And it was fascinating because I thought I was going to a White People for Black Lives event, but I was going to an Aware LA event. And when I get there, it was a room full of white people unpacking their whiteness, which is useful. And I had such a talk about paradox. It felt so self-indulgent. And I spoke this into the circle. I'm like, this feels simultaneously so self-indulgent, but also so important to be doing in a space of only white people so that no person of color is being asked to do any emotional labor. And we are looking at this, really looking at it. And they did this thing called personal stake, where we were actually looking at, even as white or white passing or mixed, mostly white people, which is what I am, how white supremacy and racism impacts even us, because we're not like the 1% of the 1%. And it was fascinating. And I have been like, that's been resonating and like ruminating for me, and just like little things here and there have been popping just because of that one thing. I didn't even stay for the whole thing. I actually left on the break halfway through, but without like, there was just so much happened in that after, even in my car ride home, there was another epiphany I had. And so I'm geeking out on this for a moment for anyone listening, because we've been talking about this a lot more, especially since we switched over from Untamed the Wild Soul to Truth Telling. Anything we could do to get out of our bubbles, even if it's just little things, the ripple effect could be massive.
Oh yeah. And that's the key, is having that mindset of, even when you don't think it's going to be valuable, you can learn something.
Yes.
And so really just opening that space of, it might not resonate with me right now, but I'm sure I'll learn something. And that's why I always say, and I always talk about this with my students. So many of them are like, well, this professor wasn't great and I didn't like that. I'm like, but you learned something, right? They were like, yeah, I did. Even if it doesn't resonate with you, you learned something. Whether it was not to do this, or whether it was, that didn't make you feel good, so now put it in your pocket and make sure you don't do that to people. So all those things that you can really learn from.
You're a blessing. I wish I had a professor like you when I was in college, because I feel like I look back and go, I didn't learn anything. And that can't possibly be true. But I wasn't in that I can always learn something mindset while I was in college. And I feel like that was a hefty investment to not be sitting there being receptive to learning.
Right, you paid all that money and you're like, what happened?
What happened here? So what's anything that you've gone to in the last few months that was like that? You were like, I don't know if I'm going to like this, but let me go and see if I learn. And you really did.
Yeah. Sometimes it's through a show. Like I'll go watch a show, and it's and I think because I have the artistic side, I'll be able to look at something artistic and somehow relate it to a non-artistic field, like business or whatever. And it just sparks juices and creativity. That just happened to me, actually. So I went and I saw Aladdin, Pantages Theater, the musical. But for me, so much of that was not only about the musical itself, but it was the way that they did it in representing the culture. So then it opened up all these different thoughts on how culture is perceived and how it was perceived through this musical. Some things were really inaccurate, right? So then it got my brain sparking, and then I started having conversations with other people that saw the show. And so just like even small things like that really make an impact. And so now it then manifested into me talking with a girlfriend of mine, a friend, and she's a writer, and she just plays. Actually, you had her on your show. She's
Nagam,
yeah. And so now all of a sudden we're talking about, well, how do we create a play? Okay, we're going to create something together. Yeah, it's in the field of women empowerment, but it's really open where anybody can go and watch this. And it's going to be about the journey to rise, right? And this idea of resilience as a woman. And so it kind of snowballed, like this, going to watch Aladdin, then snowballed into this. And so that's the next project that we're, going to be working on.
How did you and Nagam meet? I feel like people sometimes ask, there's that Danielle Laporte find your tribe, love them hard. I feel like people are always like, I need to find my tribe. How did you and Nagam meet? I always like to ask people how they made friends with people so we could give others ideas.
Well, it's beautiful because Nagam is a huge fan of Rise Up For You. So that's how we met. She bought a ticket to the conference.
Cool.
So to our Empowered Women Rise conference that we have every year. And she showed up. She was in attendance. She came. She said hi to me. She introduced herself. And then after that, she, reached back out, love to meet you, have coffee. And I'm very open to that. I'm not one of those people that, produces something and then you all come and now you leave. Like I'm very much into creating an intimate environment where you can really foster a relationship. And so we met, we started talking, and it just went from there. I went to the play, of course, Confessions of an Airwoman. I hosted one of the interview panels at the end, and the relationship kind of grew from there.
I love that. I appreciate that about you. I met Netta at a different event through a different community, through the Archangel community. But then I was on your podcast. You invited me to come speak at a Rise Up For You in Beverly Hills. This is several weeks ago at the time of recording this. But what I love about a person, when I get to go to something that they've coordinated, the people who show up are always such a reflection of the leader. And your people were so great. They were so lovely. They were so appreciative. They were so open. They were participating. No one was too cool for school. And it was this intimate, awesome feeling. And, again, the 2016, 2017 were like rough years for me. And I wasn't really available for connecting with a lot of people. And I feel like I was missing out on a lot of connections. And so to be in the room, and I was like, man, I had no idea Netta was this amazing. And it was nothing against you. It's just that I didn't have the eyes to see. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't really present to a lot of outside stuff in those 2 years because I had a lot of personal stuff going on. So I was so excited to meet both of you and see what you curate and cultivate. So can you tell, for anyone listening, I know is it all based in Southern California right now?
The events, yes. The events are based in Southern California, but our online presence is global, which is great.
Awesome.
We have webinars and podcasts and a lot of online resources, but the events currently are in Southern California. And obviously we have a 5-year plan to really take it across the country. So
I like that you're like, obviously we have a 5-year plan. That's never obvious to me. A 5-year plan is never obvious to someone like me, who's also untraining myself from flying by the seat of my pants. So good for you.
Thank you.
So where do they find Rise Up For You? Where can they get involved if they're loving what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's really simple. You can just go to the website, www.riseupforyou.com, completely spelled out. Everything you need is there, honestly. There's events, there's all of our resources, what we're doing, our calendar for the year.
Great. And now I want to ask you completely unrelated questions to anything we talked about.
Bring it on.
I really enjoy asking people if they watch television and what they watch if they do.
I don't watch a lot of television, I'll admit, but I do have a couple shows that are, they're must.
What are they?
The first one for sure is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That is a no-brainer.
Favorite characters, still living or deceased?
So I'm a big fan of Jon Snow.
Yep.
I'm glad they brought him back from the dead.
Oh my God. Sorry, spoiler for anyone who's never watched it. Happens.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm disappointed that we have to wait another year, I think.
The worst.
2019 or something of the summer. But
what's the longest they've ever made us wait? Like a year and a half?
No, usually it's every year. So this is the longest. Yeah. So I love Game of Thrones. I love Empire.
Oh, I never watched that.
I love Empire. It's a little bit rough sometimes. You get just a little bit of violence and stuff, but it's music based. So it just resonates with me, and the music and the singing and the dancing. So I'm a huge fan of that. I recently just got into The Expanse on Sci-Fi.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, and I didn't think I would enjoy it, but I just started watching a couple episodes, so I like that. Yeah, I'm a huge fan on movies. I love going to the movies.
What have you seen lately?
The last thing I saw was 3 Billboards, which was a while ago, and I really want to go see Black Panther, which I haven't seen yet, but I hear it's amazing.
So amazing. I need to see it like 4 more times because I feel like the first time you see anything, especially if there's action, my nervous system is just hijacked because I need to know what's going to happen and who's going to die and who's going to live. And there's so much amazing messaging and just so many layers to that. So I feel like I need to see it like 4 more times so I could take in all of the rest of it. There's just like epic, epic, epic. There's something I really want to see, The Space of Water. Did you see that? Or The Shape of Water?
The Shape of Water. I saw that. That was great. I saw Lady Bird. I love the Oscars, so I do like all my catching up before.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So I liked The Shape of Water. Three Billboards was for sure, hands down, my favorite.
I've never even heard of it. I have to look these things up.
Oh my gosh, you are going to love it.
Yeah?
I love it. It's so good. I'm not going to spoil it. You got to watch it.
All right, I'll check it out. Three Billboards. And then, are you reading anything right now?
Yeah, I'm kind of a book junkie for
Me
sure.
too.
But I have a tendency to bounce around. So I can't read one book at a time.
Me either.
Like I'll have a couple of them and maybe one day I'll read a little bit of this, then the next day I'll switch. But right now I'm reading a book by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm way behind on that book. So I'm reading that. Unshakable, Tony Robbins, that I'm diving into.
You are.
Yeah, I am. I'm curious. I heard it's a great book just in regards to the finance money field. So I'm reading that. So far, it's really great. I enjoy it. And then I just got The Paradox of Choice that I want to jump into because I did an incredible interview a couple weeks ago, and the guest recommended this book. It's all about this idea of how sometimes too many choices actually makes us really unhappy because we don't know what to do. And sometimes there's a peacefulness in just going to a restaurant and saying, I know what I want. Cool, done. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. I am craving simplicity so much. Actually, this was another post I did on Facebook the other day. I didn't really choose words this year, and I posted on Facebook, I didn't really choose words for 2018, but I'm pretty sure patience and simplicity have chosen me. Or maybe it was actually patience and resiliency, but then the first person to comment on it was a former guest, Rachel Rogers. I don't know if you know Rachel. I think you two would probably love each other. And this actually sparked, we're going to have her back on to talk about simplicity. She was like, oh yeah, simplicity is my jam this year. And I'm like, that is just like what you're saying. But it's the paradox of choice. Where am I going to live? What am I going to do in my business? Where am I going to use this platform? Like there's just who am I going to have on the show? When are we going to have many choices day in and day out. And there's like the two different aspects of it, right? Like so many choices and decisions to make just to function in our complex society. And then also that there's so many options for every choice.
And that's what it was, because the guy that I was talking to is a dating expert. And that's what he was talking about. He's like this idea of like all these dating apps and and now it's like, it's hard for people to just have a relationship because they're like, well, let me try this person and this person.
Are you single? Are you in a relationship?
I am single. So let me know if you know anyone.
I started dating at the time of recording this. I started dating like 2 months ago. I had taken a long break. I was calling it being delightfully without consort. And, but I started dating and I tried out a couple of the apps and it was bizarre to notice within like a week, the feeling desensitized, just like swiping through people. I actually have, I don't know where it is in the lineup related to yours, but I interviewed someone who does a bunch of research on this, Clarissa Silva, and we geeked out on that. So I'll send you the link to that because I think she was great. It was so interesting. But yeah, that is a fascinating phenomenon too. And I'll get you offline. Or actually, we'll get it from you. We'll put in the show notes your interview with whoever the dating expert guy was. Because that's something I never really talked about because I'd always been in relationships. So I am fascinated with dating and dating culture right now. I find it wildly entertaining and also kind of like a trash can fire.
Totally. It's a great analogy. Trash can fire.
My brother says that. I love it so much. So, all right, Nada, I don't want to hang up, but we have to go. You are so great. I'm excited to spend more time with you in real life. Thank you for sharing so much of your experience and yourself and your wisdom. You are fierce.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm glad we connected.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
So like for the longest time, I wasn't comfortable. Like, so when I'm with the analyst people, I just talk about analysts, analyzing data and all that. When I'm with the creative people, I talk about I never mention the other part of me until the play happened, because then my coworkers came and watched the play.
And were they like, what the hell?
Yeah. They're always like, wait, you're an analyst and what the heck? Like, how did you? Yeah. And then my actors and the people who were helping me with the play knew I had a full-time job that has nothing to do with the play. So yeah, that's when I was like, you know what? I'm done trying to like hide. I'm interested in all of that, and I'm doing all of that, and I'm okay with it, and it's okay in my standards, and whatever. Leave me alone.
I appreciate that a lot. And when you say leave me alone, did anyone actually bug you about it, or were you in your head thinking that they would?
Yeah, in my head, or sometimes comments like, "Oh, you're doing too much," or "Slow down," or stuff like that. And I would sometimes think about it. I'm like, "Am I doing too much?" Like, okay, yeah, I'm aware when I'm overwhelmed, and I'm aware when I need to like prioritize, but I'm okay. Thank you. Like, I'm not doing too much. I want to do all this stuff, and I'm still okay. Like, I'll let you know when I can't handle it anymore. Yeah.